The kingdom of Ashford lay under a gray sky, where broken towers leaned over silent streets and old cathedral walls stood like wounded giants. Long ago, this land had been proud and bright, but now soot covered every roof, every gate, and every stone road that crossed the capital. Deep below the palace, hidden behind iron doors and prayer marks, rested the giant armor frames that once defended the realm. These cathedral-sized mechs were powered by forbidden relics, and everyone feared them because every battle had left a scar on the world. Kael Mercer, a quiet young man with black hair and tired blue eyes, lived inside that fear without knowing it, because he had grown up as an orphan in the palace service halls and only wanted a small life, not a throne, not a war, and not a curse. But the central danger reached him early, when the old king died and a cracked seal beneath the palace began to hum. Because if the seals failed, the fallen crown would become a gateway for the abyss, and the demon armies in the ashlands would pour into the kingdom. The one who wanted that disaster was Lord Vance, a cold noble with silver hair and sharp, hungry eyes, because he believed the abyss would let him remake the kingdom under his control. He did not care how many people suffered, because he wanted power more than peace, and that made him the most dangerous man in Ashford. On the morning of the inheritance ceremony, Kael was called into the vault under the palace, where dust floated in pale light and broken statues watched from the walls. There he met Lady Elena, a stern woman with white hair, a silver cloak, and a face that never showed fear, because she served as the royal keeper of relic law and had spent her life guarding what should never be touched. She told Kael that his bloodline was tied to the last armor frame that still answered the old dragon chant, and that the frame had chosen him after every other pilot had failed. Kael did not understand why he mattered, but then the vault doors opened and he saw the relic waiting in chains. It was taller than a castle gate, black and gold, with horned shoulders, cracked armor plates, and a helm shaped like a knight praying with closed eyes. The air around it felt heavy and cold, as if the machine remembered every scream it had ever heard. Beneath it lay a dragon bone tuning core, the only part still alive enough to hear the sealed chant. Lady Elena explained the rules in simple words. The mech would not move for force alone. It needed the chant of the last sealed dragon, a sound bound to the lost seals that held back the abyss. Without those seals, the armor frame would fail, and anyone who tried to use it would be consumed by the curse inside the core. Kael touched the machine, and the runes on his arm burned at once, proving that the curse had already chosen him. He wanted to step away, but the vault shook as an alarm rang from the outer walls. Demon scouts had crossed the ashlands, and the kingdom no longer had time to wait. Kael climbed into the cockpit of the armor frame with shaking hands, while Lady Elena sealed the hatch and placed a relic blade beside him for emergency control. In the control chamber, he found the voice chamber, the heart cradle, and a broken mirror screen that showed the world outside in glowing shards of light. Then the machine moved when he spoke the first note of the dragon chant, and the sound was not just a word, but a deep force that seemed to wake something vast in the dark. The armor frame rose from the vault floor, towers of metal grinding as old locks broke open, and Kael nearly lost his breath from the power flooding through his body. Outside, the palace gates had been shattered by demon riders, twisted soldiers with ember eyes and black armor that burned along the edges. Lord Vance stood above them on the wall in a long red coat, watching the chaos with a calm smile, because he had opened a hidden route for the invaders to force the kingdom into panic. He wanted the crown cracked, the people desperate, and the relic vault exposed. Kael saw the betrayal clearly then, and the sight made his fear turn into anger. He drove the mech forward through the palace courtyard, striking gate towers aside and forcing the first wave of demons back in a clash of steel and light. Yet each time the dragon chant rose from his mouth, the curse under his skin spread a little farther, and dark lines climbed up his neck like living ink. He won the first battle, but he also felt something inside him being locked tighter. Lady Elena told him the first shattered seal had been hidden at Blackridge Fortress, an old border stronghold now buried under rubble and ash. If the seal stayed lost, the crown smiths under Vance would use the broken relics to finish the fallen crown, and the abyss gate would open wider with every hour. Kael traveled there with two allies who joined him at the city wall. One was Ben, a broad-armed mechanic with brown hair and a kind face who repaired old armor frames and believed machines could still protect people if used with care. The other was Mia, a young scout with red hair, quick feet, and sharp eyes, who knew the ruined roads better than anyone and wanted to keep her home from becoming monster food. They crossed the dead highway in the mech support wagon, then entered Blackridge as thunder rolled over the stones. The fortress was filled with broken banners, collapsed halls, and ghost light drifting through the courtyards. Beneath the old chapel they found the first seal chamber, but Lord Vance had already sent infernal hounds to guard it. The fight was fast and brutal in motion, yet safe in its outcomes, with the mech smashing one hound into a wall, blocking another with a shield plate, and forcing the rest to retreat through smoke and ash. Kael reached the chamber and lifted the first seal, a ring of pale metal carved with dragon marks. The moment he held it, the curse tightened again, and he saw a flash of memory that was not his own. He saw a dragon chained in a circle of light, not raging but singing, while a crown was placed above a sealed pit. The memory vanished, but the truth remained clear enough to frighten him. The dragon had not been destroyed. It had been sealed to power the kingdom, and the kingdom had built its strength on a prison. The road to the second seal led across the hollow fields, where an old battlefield still moved under layers of ash. Broken armor, bent spears, and shattered mech limbs rose from the ground like bones, and whispering spirits drifted between them. Kael learned that the dead soldiers were not haunting the land out of anger alone. They were trapped by the same relic chain that fed the mechs because forbidden power had tied their final moments to the battlefield itself. That made the second seal harder to reach since the field reacted to fear, memory, and sound. When Kael spoke the dragon chant, the whispers answered him, and the armor frame became brighter and more alive, but his body also grew weaker with each note. Ben warned him that the curse was changing him from the inside, and Lady Alina admitted a harder truth. Every seal he recovered would give the mech more strength, but it would also bind more of the dragon curse into his flesh. If all three seals returned, Kael might be able to stop the abyss, yet he might not remain fully human afterward. Kael wanted to refuse the risk, but then the ground opened with a roar, and the second seal chamber rose from below, surrounded by demon soldiers and shadow mages serving Lord Vance. The battle spread across the field, with Mia guiding the mech through collapsed trenches while Ben repaired damaged joints under fire. Kael pushed forward, chanting through pain, and the armor frame answered with blazing force. He broke through the enemy line, took the second seal, and drove the shadow mages back into the fog. But when the fight ended, he staggered inside the cockpit and saw black scales forming briefly under his skin before fading again. The curse was not just power, it was becoming a second heart. The third seal waited in the storm-crowned peaks, where living storm clouds rolled around needle-sharp cliffs and lightning flashed inside the mist. There, Lord Vance revealed his true plan at last. He had not only wanted the Abyss Gate for power, he believed the kingdom itself was too weak to survive, so he meant to use the fallen crown to tear open the abyss and command whatever came through, no matter how many lives were lost. In his mind, terror would create order and fear would make him ruler of the ashes. That was why he had guided the demon attacks, hidden the truth of the dragon, and hunted the seals in secret. He wanted to force the kingdom to kneel before him by offering it a false salvation. Kael reached the peak with the mech barely holding together, its armor cracked, its power lines glowing, and his own chest burning from the curse. There, inside a ring of storm stone, the last seal floated above a broken altar, protected by a living tempest shaped like wings and claws. Lady Alina joined him on the peak for the first time in battle, and she finally revealed the deepest twist of the story. She was not only a keeper of relic law, she had once helped seal the dragon, and she knew the chant because she had heard the dragon speak before the prison was locked. The dragon had chosen Kael because his bloodline was linked to the old royal line, and only someone born from both duty and loss could hold the final burden. Kael was not a random orphan. He was the hidden heir of the fallen crown, taken into the palace years ago to keep him away from Vance and the relic war. The truth shook him, but it also gave him a reason to stand. He was not just fighting for a kingdom that used him, he was fighting to decide what the kingdom would become. The final clash came as Vance arrived at the peak with his own corrupted armor frame, built from stolen relics and blackened steel. The sky split with lightning as the two machines faced each other, and the storm light made every broken plate shine like a blade. Vance demanded the seals, promising that Kael could live if he surrendered the crown and joined the new order. Kael answered with the dragon chant, and the last sealed dragon stirred at the edge of hearing, not as a monster, but as an ancient force trapped beneath sorrow and duty. The armor frame of Kael surged with power, and the third seal locked into place, but the curse rushed through him at the same time. His vision blurred, his arms shook, and dark light crawled across his body as the machine tried to fuse him fully into its heart. In that terrible moment, he understood the real choice. If he kept feeding the mech, he could crush Vance and seal the abyss, but the curse would finish binding him into a weapon that could never leave the cockpit. If he pulled away, the gate might open before the kingdom was safe. Kael chose neither cowardice nor blind force. He told Ben and Mia to open the outer channels, and he ordered Lady Alina to guide the final chant with him. Together they redirected the seal energy into the crown chamber below the peak, where the broken throne waited like a mouth in the stone. The storm clouds broke open, the abyss gate shuddered, and Vance was driven back by the force of the awakening dragon song. The last image Kael saw before the light swallowed the peak was the face of the dragon, huge and calm, watching him as if it knew his pain and respected his choice. When the light faded, the peak was quiet except for wind and falling ash. The fallen crown had not opened the abyss, and the demon army beyond the hills had been forced into retreat. Blackridge Fortress still stood broken, the hollow fields still whispered, and the storm-crowned peak still waited under thunder, but the kingdom had not fallen. Kael emerged from the mech with his body marked by the curse, his black hair damp with rain, his steps slow, but his mind clear. He was no longer the scared orphan who had wished for a small life. He had become someone who understood that power always asked for a price, and that real strength meant choosing what kind of burden to carry. Lady Alina bowed her head not in surrender but in respect. Ben promised to keep the frame repaired. Mia watched the horizon, ready for the next danger. And far below the broken throne, deep in the dark, the sealed dragon gave one low, distant call, as if warning that the war was not over yet. Kael turned toward that sound, knowing the curse inside him had only begun to wake, and knowing that the next seal and the next truth still waited ahead. The night above the shattered throne was cold and silent, and the wind moved through the broken stone like a tired breath. Far below the open floor, deep inside the hidden chamber under the ruin, the sealed dragon gave one low call that seemed to shake the dark itself. Kael Mercer stood still when he heard it, a young man with black hair, tired blue eyes, and a worn dark pilot coat that had already seen too many hard days. His silver relic band felt hot against his wrist, and that heat told him the curse inside him had not settled. It had only started to wake. Around him, Lady Alina stood tall in her silver cloak, with white hair, sharp gray eyes, and the calm face of a woman who had carried relic law for many years. Ben Carter, broad-shouldered and steady, adjusted the straps on his soot-stained mechanic vest, while Mia Reed, with short red hair and bright alert eyes, kept watch near the broken edge of the hall. The danger was clear now. If Lord Vance reached the next seal first, he could unite the cursed armor frame with the fallen crown and open a gateway to abyss power. If that happened, the relic order would collapse, the dragon would be broken free in the wrong way, and every safe place in the land would be at risk. So Alina gave the order to move, and the group left the shattered throne behind, with fear in their hands and purpose in their hearts. The path down was narrow, rough, and full of old stone dust that clung to their boots. Mia moved first because she always trusted her eyes before anything else, and she knew how to read broken roads and hidden traps. She had a quick mind, a brave heart, and the kind of sharp focus that made her matter every time the group faced the unknown. Ben came next, carrying his tools and checking every strange hinge and metal mark they found along the way, because he was the one person who understood the cursed armor frame well enough to keep it from falling apart. He had promised to repair it, and he meant that promise with all his strength. Kael walked near the center, not because he was the strongest, but because he was the one linked to the frame through blood, burden, and old fate. Alina stayed close to him, not as a queen, but as a guardian who knew the old rules. She said the first seal had weakened the abyss, but it had also awakened the call of the second seal. That was why the dragon had cried out. The seals were not only locks, they were warnings. They reacted when the abyss pressure rose, and each one would point the way to the next only if the heir could endure the pull without losing himself. Kael listened, and for the first time he understood why the burden mattered. He was not carrying a weapon. He was carrying a living danger that wanted a master. They reached the outer road before dawn, where the ruined land opened into a wide stretch of dead grass and broken stone fences. This place was called the Hollow Fields, and the name fit it well because the ground looked empty even when the air felt full of watching eyes. Long lines of cracked earth crossed the field like old scars, and strange pale posts stood in the distance like silent markers from another age. Mia moved ahead through the grass, then raised her hand to stop the others. She had found a fresh trail of black ash, deep wheel marks, and the broken print of armored boots. Lord Vance had been here recently. That made Kael tense, and it made Alina narrow her eyes because Vance was never careless. He was a man with silver hair, cold amber eyes, and a long red coat trimmed with black armor, and he wanted the abyss because it would give him control over the seals, the frame, and every relic tied to the old war. He did not chase power for pride alone. He believed the world needed one strong ruler, and he believed fear was the only thing that kept weak people in line. That belief made him cruel because he was willing to break anything that stood in his way. Alina said he had once studied relic law beside her long before he chose ambition over duty. That fact made the truth sharper. Vance knew the rules. He had broken them on purpose. The group kept moving, but now every step felt like a race. By midday, they reached the first ruined shrine at the edge of the fields, and there Ben found a hidden channel cut into the stone floor. Beneath it lay a narrow chamber with old prayer chains, cracked pillars, and a silver relic disc that still held a faint storm glow. This was the second seal, and it looked smaller than Kael expected, which made its danger feel worse, not better. The seal was not a simple object. It was a key part of the old binding system that held back the abyss pressure around the dragon. The chains around it were there for a reason, because the seal could be moved only when the relic law was followed exactly. Alina knelt beside it, and her stern face softened for one brief moment as she traced the old markings with 2 careful fingers. She explained that when the seals were made, the builders used dragon marks to tune them to the frame, and they hid each one in a place where greed would struggle to reach. The first seal had been guarded by height and battle. This one had been buried under silence and time. Kael felt the relic band on his wrist burn again, and when he touched the edge of the chamber, a sudden flash came into his mind. He saw a younger version of Lord Vance standing beside Alina years ago, both of them near the same seal, both of them holding pieces of the fallen crown. The image vanished in a second, but it left one clear truth behind. Vance had known about this place long before the present war began. He had not discovered the seals by accident. He had been preparing for them. The truth hit harder when the ground shook. A deep metal roar rolled across the fields, and the cursed armor frame rose from the distant ridge with its horned shoulders cutting through the mist. Its black and gold plates were cracked but still grand, and its rune seams glowed like open fire under broken glass. Vance stood on a raised command platform near the frame, with his cold face turned toward the group and the fractured black crown in his hand. His smile was thin and sharp, and it carried no warmth at all. He called out to Alina first, saying she had spent too long hiding behind old rules. Then he spoke to Kael, and his voice turned almost gentle, which made it worse. He said the boy was never meant to wear a curse. He was meant to be a lock, a living part of the old system, and if he accepted that role fully, he could help Vance open the abyss without pain. Kael froze when he heard that, because the words touched the fear he had never spoken aloud. Alina saw the doubt on his face and stepped in front of him at once. She told him not to listen, and then she gave him the part of the truth she had kept hidden. The cursed armor frame had once been built not only to fight the abyss, but to contain a seal failure if the dragon ever woke wrong. The heir to the frame was supposed to guide that burden, not control it alone. That was why the relic band had chosen Kael. It was not a prize, it was a test. Vance had learned this old design and twisted it into a plan of conquest. Then the attack began. Vance ordered the frame forward, and the giant machine thundered across the broken ground with enough force to shake the dry grass flat. Ben ran at once for the chamber cover, trying to protect the second seal from the impact, while Mia dashed through the broken posts to flank the platform and cut off Vance from his support line. She moved with fast, clean steps, using the ruined field better than anyone else could. Alina lifted a relic charm and called for the old binding words, and pale light rose around the seal chamber like a shield. Kael stayed between the seal and the frame, even though fear tightened his chest, because he finally understood that courage was not the absence of fear. It was the choice to stand anyway. The frame raised its shield arms, and the blast from its rune seams slammed into Alina's barrier with a bright wave of light. The impact did not destroy them, but it forced everyone back, and the seal chamber began to crack along the floor. Ben shouted that the tuning core was unstable, which meant the frame was close to losing control. Kael heard the dragon call again from far below the earth, lower this time, as if it was answering his heartbeat. In that moment the curse inside him surged, and his silver relic band flashed so hard that the air around him bent. For one terrible second, he saw the shape of a great black gate opening in his mind, and behind it he saw Vance standing in the light, not as a ruler, but as a man being watched by something far older and far hungrier. That was the twist Kael had not expected. Vance was not trying to command the abyss alone. He was trying to become its chosen vessel because he believed it would protect him from the thing that had marked him long ago. The battle slowed when Kael made a choice that surprised even him. He did not rush the frame. He did not try to fight Vance with anger. Instead, he reached toward the second seal and let the curse answer without letting it lead. Elena saw what he was doing and spoke the old stabilizing words in a steady voice, while Ben opened the seal chains just enough for the relic disc to rise. Mia, now circling behind the platform, cut a support cable and forced Vance to turn away for one brief moment. That single opening was enough. Kael placed his hand over the seal, and the silver band on his wrist lit with pale blue fire. The second seal rose into the air, wrapped in storm light, and moved toward the frame on its own, as if it recognized the one person who was finally ready to carry it. The cursed armor frame answered with a deep pulse, and for the first time since the war began, its glowing seams became steady instead of wild. Vance saw that and snarled in real shock because Kael had done what he believed was impossible. The heir had not submitted to the curse, he had learned how to guide it. The frame forced Vance back with a heavy shock of light, and the villain staggered but did not fall. He lifted the fallen crown, then smiled again, this time with real anger behind it. He said this was only the first layer of the truth, and then he retreated into the shadow of the frame as his forces pulled him away. The field grew quiet again, but it was the kind of quiet that comes after a storm, not after peace. When the dust settled, Elena stood beside Kael and looked at him with new respect because she now saw that he had begun to change. He was still afraid, still tired, and still carrying a burden that no young man should have had to bear, but he was no longer standing inside that fear alone. Ben checked the frame and found that the second seal had stabilized one of the cracked rune seams, which meant the next journey would be possible if they moved soon. Mia returned from the broken ridge with a torn cloak and a grim report. Vance had left scouts behind, and those scouts were heading toward the eastern road, where the third seal was said to wait under Storm Stone. That meant the chase was far from over. Elena told the group that the old records spoke of one more truth tied to the seals, and that truth was hidden where the dragon had first been bound. She did not say more, but Kael saw in her face that she feared what he might learn there. He looked toward the dark horizon and felt the curse inside him settle into a strange new shape, less like a wound and more like a door that had not yet opened. He still did not fully understand what he was becoming, but he knew one thing now. He was not just a victim of the frame, he was part of its future. And somewhere far ahead, beyond the hollow fields and beyond Vance, the next seal was waiting in the storm, while the broken throne behind them remained silent, as if listening for the next step of a war that had only just begun. The hollow fields stretched under a low gray sky, and the wind moved across the dead grass like a warning that never stopped speaking. Broken stone fences ran through the plain in crooked lines, and pale marker posts stood at long distances, each one half buried in cracked earth. Behind Kael Mercer, the broken throne remained silent on the hill, dark and empty, while the storm ahead rolled like a slow battle drum. Kael stood in his worn, dark pilot coat, ash-marked boots planted in the dirt, his black hair pushed back by the wind, and his tired blue eyes fixed on the far horizon. The cursed armor frame inside the ruin behind them had changed him in a way he could feel but not yet explain, and that made the path more dangerous than ever. He was no longer just trying to survive the frame. He was now tied to its future, and if Lord Vance reached the next seal first, the seals would stop being barriers and become keys to a door that should never open. Lady Elena stood beside him with her silver hair moving only a little in the wind, her sharp gray eyes steady and watchful. She wore her silver cloak over a dark command dress with hard armor pieces at the collar and polished boots that never seemed to slow her down. She was the keeper of Relic Law, the former seal guardian, and the only person in the group who fully understood how bad the coming storm could become. Beside her waited Ben Carter, a broad man with brown hair, a soot-stained mechanic vest, rolled-up sleeves, a tool belt, fingerless gloves, and heavy work boots that had walked through too many broken places already. He was the repair specialist, and he mattered because the cursed frame would fail without his hands. A few steps back, Mia Reed watched the fields with bright, alert eyes, her short red hair tucked under a hooded cloak, her fitted scout jacket tight against the wind, and her light armor pads ready for trouble. She was quick, brave, and sharp-eyed, and she mattered because she could read the ruined roads better than anyone else. Elena raised her hand, and the small storm charm on her wrist gave off a soft, pale light as she spoke the binding words that held the group together. She told Kael that the second seal was buried under the hollow fields, hidden beneath old prayer chains and stone that had been left to rot by men who feared what the relic could do. She also told him the hard truth. If Vance found it first, he would use the fallen crown to gather all the seals, and the abyss would no longer need a broken throne. It would have a doorway. They moved at dawn through the dead plain, following Mia as she led them between broken fence lines and flooded cuts in the earth. The storm had not yet broken, but thunder rolled far above the clouds, and every sound seemed to bend and twist across the field. Kael kept feeling the change inside him, and each time he touched the silver relic band on his wrist, the new shape inside his curse answered with a faint pulse, like a locked room hearing someone walk past its door. He hated that he could feel it, but he also knew that feeling was the only reason he had not collapsed. Ben walked close enough to steady him when the ground gave way under one boot, and he muttered that the frame had already started treating Kael like a relay point instead of a victim. Elena did not correct him. She only said that relic law had one rule older than any kingdom. Whatever was bound by a seal could be opened by blood, by will, or by a chosen vessel. Kael did not like hearing that word chosen because it sounded too much like fate, and fate had already stolen enough from him. By midday they reached a low basin where the soil had cracked in a wide ring, as if something massive had once pressed up from below and then stopped. Mia found the old marker stones first, each one carved with dragon marks so worn they almost looked smooth. Ben knelt and cleared away the dirt, revealing the edge of a hidden metal door set flat into the earth. The door was wrapped in rusted prayer chains that had fused together over time, and in the center rested the second seal, a silver relic disc with a chipped edge and a faint storm glow trapped inside its surface. It was smaller than Kael expected, but the air around it felt heavy and cold, like a room full of held breath. Elena became very still. Her hand moved to the storm charm, and the charm glowed brighter, warning her that the seal was awake enough to react. She explained that the second seal did not only stabilize the armor frame, it also calmed the abyss influence that tried to reach into anyone tied to the cursed core. Without it, Kael would keep changing, and the change would not stay under his control forever. Kael looked at the relic disc and understood with a hard twist in his chest that the curse inside him was not just harming him. It was also trying to make room for something else. Then the ground shook, and the first answer from Lord Vance came through the storm. Black riders appeared on the ridge in long red coats and dark armor trim, their horses scattering dead grass as they surged forward. At their center rode Vance himself, silver hair sharp against the dark sky, cold amber eyes locked on the basin, and a crown-shaped ring glinting on one hand. He looked calm, elegant, and cruel, as if the field belonged to him already. He called out that relic law was a lie made by cowards, and that the seals had always been prison locks built to keep the strongest thing in the world from being used. He wanted the abyss power because he believed strength should not be hidden, sealed, or shared. He believed the world belonged to those willing to take it, and he wanted the fallen crown because it could merge the seals into a gateway key. That was not greed alone, it was a broken dream turned sharp. Vance truly believed he was meant to rule what other people feared. The riders struck hard, trying to take the seal while Elena pushed Kael behind the hidden door. Ben grabbed a heavy repair hammer from his belt and drove one rider back from the lip of the basin, while Mia moved through the dust with fast steps, cutting the enemy line apart with the kind of clean precision only a scout could manage. Elena lifted her storm charm and spoke a binding phrase, and pale light flared around the basin like a shield. The enemy charge stumbled, but Vance only smiled because the clash had shown him what he wanted to know. Kael was already linked to the frame, and the seal had already answered him. When the storm finally hit, it did not fall like rain. It came as a wall of wind and white light that swallowed the basin and made the ground ring like a great drum. In that chaos, Kael reached toward the second seal, and the cursed armor frame answered from far behind the hill with a deep, distant tremor. For one terrible moment, the world around him changed shape. He saw a tall hall of black stone, a fractured black crown resting above a circle of relic sockets, and the faint outline of the fallen crown waiting to be completed. He also saw something else. He saw a woman standing in that same hall, her face hidden by shadow, her hand resting near the crown as if she had once known it well. The vision struck him hard, but it did not feel like an attack. It felt like a memory that belonged to the frame, not to him. Elena saw the look on his face and stepped closer. Her voice stayed calm, but her eyes carried fear now because she understood what he had just touched. The frame was not merely cursed. It had been designed to receive a living mind, and the first guardian had likely hidden the truth because the truth was unbearable. Kael was not only bound to the armor. He may have been made to inherit it from the start. The revelation hit him like cold water, and for a moment he forgot the battle around him. If the first guardian had hidden the truth, then the frame was not a random prison, and Vance was not the only one chasing a broken dream. Someone had built this system on purpose, someone had expected an heir, and someone had left Kael to be found at the exact wrong time. The thought scared him, but it also gave him a strange kind of strength, because it meant his life had not been stolen without reason. It had been aimed. Ben shouted for him to move as the riders tried again to break through the storm line, and Mia slipped around the left flank to pull one enemy horse away from the basin. Alina faced Vance directly, her silver cloak snapping in the wind, and she told him that relic law would not bend for his pride. Vance answered that law had already failed the world because it had only protected secrets while the weak suffered. Then he threw a black shard toward the basin, and the shard struck the prayer chains, making the hidden door groan open a finger width more. Dark mist pushed out from below, and the second seal began to rise from its bed on trembling light. Kael felt the curse inside him pull toward it, not with pain now, but with hunger. He stepped forward before he could stop himself, his fear still there, but no longer in command. He understood then that the coming war would not be won by running from the frame. It would be won by learning why it had chosen him, and by deciding what kind of door he would become. As the storm howled around them, the seal lifted higher, Vance's riders closed in once more, and the broken throne behind them seemed to listen in silence, as if the next step of the war had finally been found, but not yet taken. The storm pressed low over the hollow fields, and the broken plain looked like a place the sky had abandoned long ago. Dead grass bent under the wind, pale marker posts leaned at sharp angles, and cracked earth ran out toward a ruined hill where the broken throne waited in silence. Kael Mercer stood near the edge of a buried metal door, his black hair wet with rain, his tired blue eyes locked on the rising seal above the ground. He was a young man with a slim build, a serious face, a worn dark pilot coat, leather gloves, ash-marked boots, and a silver relic band around his wrist. He had been afraid since this war began, but now his fear had changed. It was still there, yet it no longer ruled him. Beside him stood Lady Alina, a tall woman with white hair, sharp gray eyes, a silver cloak, and a dark command dress with high collar armor pieces. She was calm, stern, and respected, and she knew the old relic laws better than anyone alive. She had once guarded the seals, and now she carried a small storm charm made of pale metal and worn thread, glowing softly in her hand as she spoke binding words. Ben Carter stood close to her, a broad man with brown hair, a soot-stained mechanic vest, rolled-up sleeves, a tool belt, fingerless gloves, and heavy work boots. He was kind-faced and dependable, and he had spent his life fixing things other people gave up on. Mia Reed moved along the broken fence line, a woman with red hair in a short, practical cut, bright, alert eyes, a fitted scout jacket, dark travel pants, light armor pads, and a hooded cloak. She was quick, brave, and sharp-eyed, and she had guided them through roads that should have collapsed hours ago. The central problem was now clear to all of them. If the seals were taken, the abyss would open wider, and Lord Vance would gain a power that could crush every guarded place in the land. If Kael failed to face the cursed frame, the hidden war would end before it even had a chance to begin. The seal rose higher from the ground, and its pale light cut through the storm like a warning blade. Rust flaked from the hidden metal door below, and old prayer chains dragged across the dirt as if the earth itself did not want to let go. Kael stepped closer because the moment he feared had finally arrived. He felt the silver relic band on his wrist grow warm, and the cursed armor frame behind him answered with a low, distant hum. The frame was cathedral-sized, black and gold, with horned shoulders, cracked holy-looking armor plates, glowing rune seams, a helm shaped like a praying knight, giant shield arms, and a dragon bone tuning cord deep in the chest. It was ancient, intimidating, and cursed, and it had already shown him a memory no one else could see. In that memory had stood the first guardian woman, a mysterious woman with dark hair hidden by shadow, wearing ancient relic guardian robes. She had looked at him with sorrow and purpose, and the feeling had stayed with him like a hand on his back. Alina turned her gray eyes toward him and spoke with a steady voice. She told him that the frame had not chosen him by accident. Long ago, the Guardians built it as a door and a lock, not as a weapon alone. The dragon bone tuning core could answer only to a living will because the abyss power inside the frame needed a human choice to stay controlled. Kael listened and the truth struck him hard. He had thought he was being hunted by a curse, but he was also being tested by a duty. Alina explained that the seals were not just tools. They were pieces of an old promise made to keep the abyss asleep under the world, and the fallen crown was the key Vance wanted to force into place. If Vance gathered the seals and merged them, he could turn them into a gateway key. Kael asked why Vance would risk so much. Alina did not soften the answer. Vance believed the abyss would give him a kingdom no law could limit, and he wanted the fear of others to become his shield. He did not seek safety, he sought control. That was why he sent the Black Riders, armored men on dark horses in long red coats and shadowed helmets, to close in through the storm. They carried storm dust on their gear, and they rode with ruthless purpose as Vance watched from farther back, his silver hair slick with rain, his cold amber eyes sharp, his long red coat dark against the gray sky, and his crown-shaped ring flashing on his hand. He was lean, elegant, cruel, and ambitious, and every move he made was meant to force everyone else to kneel. The first clash came fast. The Black Riders spread out across the hollow fields, trying to trap Kael between the rising seal and the hidden door. Mia shouted a warning and darted left, drawing two riders away from the center with quick footwork and sharp turns. Ben slammed a heavy wrench into a broken marker post and used it to stop a charging horse from reaching Alina. Then he grabbed a loose chain and looped it around the rider's saddle, forcing the man to lose balance and pull back. Alina lifted her storm charm and spoke the binding words again, and soft light spread in a narrow circle that weakened the storm pressure around the seal. Kael felt the frame answer, not with full power, but with a deep pulse that matched his heartbeat. He understood then that the frame was not waiting for him to become fearless. It was waiting for him to become honest. He was still afraid of the power inside it, and afraid of what Vance would do if he failed, but he also knew he could no longer stand apart from the choice. So he ran toward the buried door, dropped to one knee, and pressed his silver relic band against the rusted metal. The door gave a dull shudder, and the prayer chains lifted as if something below had heard him. At the same moment, the seal above him split its blue light into thin lines that drew across the ground toward the frame. Kael saw symbols flash across the black and gold armor in the distance, and for one bright second the frame looked less like a machine and more like a giant sleeping guardian. Then the vision returned. The first guardian woman stood inside the frame memory again, her dark hair hidden by shadow, and she silently showed him a path through the storm. She pointed toward the broken throne on the hill, and Kael suddenly understood that the throne was not empty by accident. It had once been a witness seat for relic law, and now it served as a marker that could reveal where the second seal had been hidden long ago. The revelation changed everything. The war was not only about the frame, it was about the old guardians, their broken promise, and the reason the seals had been split in the first place. Vance wanted to force them together too soon, before anyone understood the cost. Then the ground beneath the hollow fields opened with a heavy groan, and the buried metal door slid aside just enough to reveal a dark stairway leading down. Cold air rose from below, carrying the smell of old stone and storm water. Alina stepped closer, her face tense but controlled, and she told Kael that the second seal must be reached before Vance did. She also admitted something she had held back. She had once helped guard the first chamber below the fields, but she had failed to protect the full truth of the seals when the old order split apart. Her voice stayed calm, yet her shame was real, and that made her more human in Kael's eyes. Ben looked at her and nodded once because he understood what it meant to live with a broken thing and still keep trying to fix it. Mia returned from the left flank with rain on her hood and grit on her cheek, and she said the riders were regrouping with Vance at the far ridge. He was not charging blindly, he was waiting because he knew the second seal would force them into the open. Kael stood up, and the frame behind him answered with a deeper hum, as if it was waking in small pieces. The storm above the fields twisted harder, and for 1 second lightning lit the broken throne so sharply that its dark stone and cracked metal looked like the mouth of some silent judge. Kael felt the fear again, but now it felt smaller. He had learned the first part of his task. He did not need to be free of fear. He needed to move with it and keep choosing the right path. He looked at Alina, Ben, and Mia, and he saw not helpers at his side, but people who had chosen to stand in the same storm for the same reason. That mattered more than he had expected. Vance raised one hand from the ridge, and the Black Riders began to circle again, ready to strike the moment Kael reached the stairs. Kael placed his palm on the open door, drew one slow breath and stepped toward the darkness below. He did not yet know what waited under the hollow fields or what the second seal would demand from him, but he knew this much for certain. The war had crossed its first true line, the hidden truth was beginning to surface, and whatever came next would force him to become more than the boy who had once tried to run. The darkness under the hollow fields was not empty, and Kael Mercer felt that truth the moment he stepped below the buried door. The air was cold, stale, and heavy with old dust, and every breath tasted like stone and rust. He was a young man with black hair, tired blue eyes, a worn dark pilot coat, leather gloves, ash-marked boots, and a silver relic band on his wrist. He was slim, scared, and stubborn, and he mattered because the cursed armor frame had chosen him. Above him, the Black Riders still circled in the dead grass, and that meant the war had only begun. If Kael failed here, Lord Vance would gain the second seal, reach the next relic, and open the path to Abyss power. That power would let him crush every guard line, seize the broken throne on the hill, and turn the whole land into a place where fear obeyed only him. That was the danger, and Kael understood it as he walked down the narrow stairs into the earth. Behind him, Lady Alina stood near the open doorway, her silver cloak moving in the wind from above. She was a woman with white hair and sharp gray eyes, tall and stern, and she carried the calm of someone who had guarded Relic Law for many years. Her dark command dress and high-collar armor pieces made her look like a commander and a judge at once, and the small storm charm in her hand glowed softly whenever she spoke binding words. She did not enter the hidden chamber because her role was to hold the line outside and keep the seal from waking too soon. She had once served as a seal guardian, and she knew the old rules better than anyone alive. Ben Carter was there too, a broad man with brown hair, a soot-stained mechanic vest, rolled sleeves, a tool belt, fingerless gloves, and heavy work boots. He was kind, steady, and the armor repair specialist who kept the cursed frame from tearing itself apart. Mia Reed waited farther back in the broken grass, a woman with short red hair, bright eyes, a scout jacket, dark travel pants, light armor pads, and a hooded cloak. She was quick, brave, and sharp-eyed, and she watched the riders with a scout body crouch ready to run. Each of them had a reason to matter, because without one of them, Kael would never reach the truth below. The stairs ended in a chamber made of old stone, broken altar blocks, and long metal ribs sunk into the walls. A buried metal door lay open in the floor, and old prayer chains hung around its edge like warnings from a forgotten age. Kael looked down and saw a narrow hall that led under the hollow fields toward the thing they had come to find. The second seal was not a jewel or a weapon. It was a silver relic disc, cracked at the edge, wrapped in old prayer chains and touched by a faint storm glow. Long ago, the seal had been placed there to stabilize the cursed armor frame and weaken the abyss influence in its core. If the seal was removed in the wrong way, the frame could turn wild, and the dragon bone tuning core in its chest could answer something dark and hungry. That was why the seal mattered. That was why Lord Vance wanted it. He did not want safety or order. He wanted all the seals together so he could merge them into the fallen crown, a fractured black crown with red vein-like cracks and relic sockets along the rim. With that crown, he could open a gateway key for the abyss, and he believed the power beyond it would make him untouchable. Kael moved deeper, and the chamber around him grew stranger with every step. On the walls, old marks of dragon sigils caught the dim light and shone for a moment before sinking back into shadow. Then the air shifted, and the cursed armor frame answered him from far above, as if some hidden thread tied the machine to the earth below. The black and gold mech stood on the surface like a cathedral made for war, with horned shoulders, cracked, holy-looking armor plates, glowing rune seams, a helm shaped like a praying knight, giant shield arms, and the dragon bone tuning core in its chest. Kael had learned to fear it, but he had also learned that fear was not the same as refusal. A sudden pulse moved through his silver relic band, and the chamber brightened for one breath. Then the world around him bent, and a memory opened inside the cursed frame like a wound of light. Kael saw a woman standing in ancient guardian robes, her dark hair hidden by shadow, her face calm and unreadable. She was the first guardian woman, and though her voice came only as a distant echo, her words were clear enough to understand. She had helped build the seal system long ago, not to control the armor, but to keep the armor from becoming a door. She had served with others who feared the abyss because they knew the cursed frame was made from power that should never have been fully joined. The first seal had held the frame stable, the second seal kept the hidden chamber closed, and the third seal waited somewhere else, high and far away, where storm light struck broken altar stone. the revelation hit Kael hard. The armor was not simply a weapon. It was a lock, a prison, and a warning. Lord Vance had not been hunting relics just to win a battle. He had been trying to rebuild a forgotten system so he could break it from the inside and use what was trapped beyond. Kael finally understood why the war had felt so wrong from the start. It was not only a fight for land, it was a fight over what was sealed away beneath history itself. Before Kael could speak, a low rumble shook the chamber and dust drifted from the ceiling. Above ground, the Black Riders had turned their horses and charged toward the stairway, ready to strike the moment anyone tried to return. Mia saw them first. She let out a sharp warning, then sprinted across the dead grass to draw them away from the opening. She was small compared with the riders, but she moved with the speed of a hawk and the courage of someone who did not plan to be caught. Ben ran to the edge of the doorway and shouted down to Kael, telling him the frame could not take many more hard shocks if the riders forced a fight. Lady Alina lifted her storm charm, and soft light curled around her fingers as she spoke a binding phrase that made the air above the door shimmer. Her magic did not attack, it held, it delayed, it bought time. That was her gift and her burden. Lord Vance appeared through the storm dust in his long red coat, his black armor trim catching the gray light, his ornate gloves still, his crown-shaped ring flashing on one hand. His silver hair moved in the wind, and his cold amber eyes fixed on the stairway like a man staring at a locked prize. He had brought the Black Riders not just to kill a threat, but to force the seal open by pressure and fear. He wanted Kael to panic, because panic would make the frame unstable, and instability would make the seal easier to break. Kael reached the second seal at the center of the chamber, and there it waited in a ring of broken altar stone. It floated just above the floor, wrapped in prayer chains, glowing with a faint storm light that made the room feel alive. He stretched out one trembling hand, and the silver relic band on his wrist warmed against his skin. Then the first guardian woman appeared again, not as a full body, but as a clear vision inside the frame memory, and her silent face carried a message stronger than words. The seal would not answer force, it would answer trust. It would bind to the one who accepted the burden without greed. Kael remembered every time he had tried to run, every time fear had told him to leave others behind, and every time someone had stood beside him anyway. He thought of Ben with his tools and steady hands. He thought of Mia racing through danger without asking for praise. He thought of Lady Alina, who had held the line even when the cost was her own safety. Then he placed both hands around the seal and spoke, not loudly but clearly, a promise that he would not use its power to rule. The prayer chains flashed white, the chamber shook, and the second seal lifted free with a deep ringing sound that rolled through the earth. At once the hidden room changed. The old stone wall behind the altar opened with a grinding roar, revealing a narrow passage lined with dragon marks and storm-lit dust. Kael felt the seal settle into his grip, cool and heavy as if it had finally accepted him. But the victory was not complete. Above them, Lord Vance shouted an order and the riders pushed harder, trying to break through Lady Alina binding line. Ben braced his feet and used his repair tools to lock a support brace across the doorway, keeping the hidden stairs from collapsing. Mia darted between horses and kicked loose stones into their path, forcing one rider to pull back and another to veer aside. Lady Alina stood at the front, white hair bright in the storm light, her stern face fixed and her voice steady as she repeated the old binding words. She was calm, but her eyes showed strain because she knew Vance was not there for one seal alone. He was testing the line, trying to find out how much resistance remained before he made his next move. Then Lord Vance smiled, and that smile carried the first true sign of his deeper plan. He raised one gloved hand, and a shard of black light flashed near his ring, showing a brief image of the fallen crown in his mind. Kael saw it too, as if the villain wanted him to understand the threat on purpose. The crown was already being prepared for the next stage, and the third seal was the last piece Vance needed before he could complete the gateway key. That was the twist hidden under the hollow fields. The seals were not only locks. They were also parts of a control system, and whoever united them would decide whether the abyss stayed closed or became a weapon. Kael now had the second seal, but holding it made him feel the weight of every future choice. He was not just protecting a relic anymore. He was standing in the center of a plan that could reshape the whole war. As the passage behind the altar opened wider, he took one last look toward the stairs above, where Alina, Ben, and Mia still held against the riders. Then he stepped into the new tunnel, the seal in his hands, the truth in his mind, and a harder path waiting deeper below. The next chamber was calling, and somewhere ahead, the third seal and the broken truth of the cursed frame were still waiting to be found. The tunnel below the altar was narrow, cold, and lined with old stone that seemed to hold its breath. Kael Mercer moved forward with careful steps, his black hair damp with sweat, his tired blue eyes locked on the path ahead, and the first seal clenched tight in his gloved hand. The air smelled like dust, iron, and old rain, and every few steps a weak blue glow from the seal painted the walls in pale light. Above him, far beyond the stone and the noise, Lady Elena, Ben Carter, and Mia Reed were still fighting to hold the stairs. Kael knew that if they failed, Lord Vance and his black riders would flood the altar room, seize the opening, and reach the same hidden chamber that had swallowed so many secrets before. That was the central danger now. The war was no longer only on the surface. It had gone underground into the heart of a buried machine of faith, power, and lies. Kael was not alone in that tunnel for long. The first seal in his hand began to warm, and then a faint line of runes lit up in the stone floor ahead. That light led him toward a chamber that had not seen daylight in a very long time. Kael did not fully trust what he was doing, and that fear mattered because he had already learned that the cursed armor frame answered to bloodline, memory, and pain. He was a young man chosen by something he did not understand, and that choice had made him a target. Lord Vance wanted the seals because he believed Abyss power could give him control over the whole war. Vance was cold, elegant, and cruel, but his motive was simple enough for anyone to understand. He wanted a power no army could resist, and he was willing to twist relic law, break old rules, and ruin the land to get it. Kael had seen enough of the frame to know that if Vance brought the seals together with the fractured crown, the Abyss would not stay contained. It would spill out, and everything tied to the relic halls, the roads, and the field camps would be swallowed by it. The tunnel opened into a wide lower hall, and Kael stopped at the edge of it. The room was round and deep, with broken pillars, prayer marks on the floor, and a huge empty space in the center where something had once stood. At the far side, a buried metal door lay half exposed under dirt and old chains, its dragon marks worn smooth by time. Ben would have called it a miracle of old craft, but Kael only felt the weight of warning in the silence. Then the seal in his hand gave one sharp pulse, and the buried door answered with a low click from beneath the stone. Kael crossed the hall and knelt by the edge of the door, brushing aside dust with his sleeve. The chains were not there to keep people out, they were there to keep something from opening too soon. He saw that now. The moment he touched the rusted seam, a hidden lock turned inside the floor and the door shifted with a heavy groan. A narrow stairway dropped downward into darkness, and cold air rose from below like a held secret finally waking up. Kael descended slowly, one hand on the wall, the first seal still bright in the other. The steps were steep and uneven, and the stone under his boots felt wetter with each level. Halfway down, the tunnel changed. The walls became smoother, as if they had been shaped by careful hands long ago. Small marks of dragons, prayer circles, and shield shapes lined both sides, and those symbols told Kael something important. This place had once belonged to the same order that built the cursed frame. It had not been made by raiders or by Vance. It had been sealed by guardians who understood the frame better than anyone alive now. That made the next truth even harder to ignore. The frame had not simply been stolen from a forgotten vault. It had been prepared, hidden, and linked to a bloodline on purpose. Kael felt the shape of that fact before he fully understood it. He was connected to the frame because somebody had arranged it that way long before Vance came looking for power. Then the air changed again, and the memory inside the frame stirred. A vision broke over him like sudden cold water. He saw a woman with dark hair hidden by shadow, wearing ancient guardian robes, standing in front of the frame with calm hands and a sad face. This was the first guardian woman, and she was not speaking to the room at all. She was speaking to him through time, through the cursed metal, through the weight of a promise made long ago. Her voice reached him in pieces, soft but clear. She said the frame was never meant for a greedy ruler. She said it was a prison and a shield at the same time. She said the dragon core inside it could hold Abyss power only if 3 seals remained apart, and only if a true heir carried the burden with steady hands. Kael understood part of the answer at once, and the rest landed harder. The curse was not just in the armor. The curse was in the broken lie built around it. Someone had once used the frame as a weapon, then blamed Kael bloodline for the damage when the real traitor had tried to take control. That meant the family shame he carried was not fully true. It had been shaped by fear, by guilt, and by a careful frame-up meant to hide the real theft. Kael stood very still in the stairwell, his heart pounding because the truth was changing him in real time. He had spent so long thinking he was a mistake. Now he was learning that he was a key. That did not make him feel stronger yet, it made the world feel heavier. Still, he kept going because Alina, Ben, and Mia were depending on him, and because the tunnel below was leading toward answers that could save them all. The stairway ended in a chamber lit by a pale storm glow that seemed to come from the walls themselves. At the center of the room, above a ring of broken altar stone, floated the third seal. It was a white and gold shard, small at first glance but impossible to ignore because dragon sigils spun around it in slow, bright circles. Kael stared at it in silence. The air around the seal crackled softly like a storm trapped inside a prayer. He understood why the guardians had hidden it here. This seal was not only a lock, it was a test. It would respond to honesty, to courage, and to the will to protect others instead of using power for selfish gain. Before he could reach for it, the chamber shook from above. A dull impact rolled through the stone, followed by another, and Kael knew the riders were pushing harder against Alina, Ben, and Mia. He looked upward once, though he could not see them, and he silently promised he would not let their fight be wasted. Then he stepped into the broken altar ring, and the chamber answered with light. At that same moment, the seal in his hand and the floating shard in the chamber began to pull toward each other. Kael felt the force in his wrist, the silver relic band burning cold against his skin, and he almost dropped to one knee as the pressure grew. The chamber revealed another hidden mark on the floor, a circular outline where something larger had once been placed. It matched the shape of the fallen crown, the fractured black crown that Vance carried with such twisted pride. Kael saw it clearly now. The crown was not just a symbol. It was a tool made to join the seals into a gateway key. Lord Vance had been hunting the seals because he wanted to force the crown and the relics together, then open a path to abyss power. But the first guardian woman had left a warning inside the vision, and that warning was simple. If the seals were joined the wrong way, the gate would answer to hunger instead of protection. That would let the abyss spill into the war, and no side would remain untouched. Kael reached for the third seal, and the chamber flashed white. For one breath, the room vanished, and he saw a different scene inside the frame memory. He saw the same guardian woman kneeling beside a younger version of the cursed armor frame, while another figure stood behind her in deep shadow. The shadowed figure wore a crown ring, and Kael did not need to see the face to know the shape of the truth. Someone had betrayed the guardians from within. Someone had helped hide the frame, then lied about what it was for, then used that lie to bury the real story under years of fear. The revelation hit Kael hard because it changed the war around him. This was not only a fight over relics, it was a fight over who had the right to decide history. Kael drew a steady breath, closed his fingers around the third seal, and the light settled into his palm instead of tearing him apart. That was the moment his fear changed into something else. He was still afraid, but now his fear had a direction. He would keep going, he would carry the truth upward. And when he faced Vance, he would not speak like a lost boy anymore. He would speak like the heir the guardians had waited for, even if he still had much to learn. Far above, the sound of battle began to fade, then sharpen again, as if Alina had pushed the riders back for the moment and then had to meet another wave. Kael could not see her, but he knew her mind by now. She was calm under pressure, and she would never waste a single opening. Ben would be holding the line with stubborn hands and a loyal heart, while Mia would keep moving, watching every path, ready to strike where the riders least expected it. Kael thought of them all while he stood in the storm-lit chamber, and that thought gave him strength. He was no longer walking through the tunnel alone in spirit, even if his feet were alone on the stone. He tucked the third seal against his chest, looked back once at the broken altar ring, and saw a faint trail of black dust leaking from a crack in the floor. It led deeper into the lower complex, toward a space that felt older and colder than the room he had left. The next chamber was waiting, and somewhere beyond it, the truth of the frame was still unfinished. Kael took one last steady breath, then stepped forward into the deeper dark, carrying 3 seals worth of hope, fear, and consequences into the hidden heart of the war. The hidden lower complex felt like a place that had forgotten the world above it. Cold air moved through the stone halls in slow waves, and every wall seemed to hold the memory of old prayers, old warnings, and old fear. Kael Mercer walked alone at first, with his black hair damp at the temples and his tired blue eyes fixed on the thin line of black dust ahead of him. His worn, dark pilot coat brushed against the stone, his leather gloves stayed tight around the 3 seals he carried, and the silver relic band on his wrist gave off a faint, steady pulse. He was the chosen heir to the cursed armor frame, and that fact had made him both valuable and dangerous. He wanted the truth of the frame because he needed to clear his name and stop the ruin that had been blamed on him. He also wanted to know why the armor seemed to answer his fear as much as his will. Behind him, in the upper chambers, Lady Alina was still holding the line with Ben Carter and Mia Reed, while Lord Vance was closing in with his Black Riders. The stakes were simple and heavy. If Vance reached the seals first, he could unite them, wake the abyss power hidden below the complex, and turn a buried curse into a weapon for himself. Kael followed the black dust trail deeper, and the corridor began to narrow around him. The air changed as he went, becoming older and colder, as if the stone had been sealed for many years without light or sound. He saw broken prayer chains hanging from cracked hooks in the walls, and he saw old dragon marks cut into the floor in careful circles. Each mark matched the seals in his hands, and that made his chest tighten with a hard, uneasy hope. He was not alone for long. Mia Reed reached him first, moving fast and low through the dark with her red hair tied back in a short practical cut, her bright eyes scanning every shadow before they could touch him. She was the guide through ruined roads, and she cared because she had seen too many villages suffer when relic wars reached them. Ben Carter came next, broad and steady, with brown hair, a soot-stained mechanic vest, and a tool belt full of repair tools that clinked softly with each step. He had the strong hands of a builder and the calm face of a man who never left a friend behind. He mattered because the cursed armor frame could not be trusted without someone who understood broken metal and damaged systems. Lady Alina entered last, tall and severe, with white hair, sharp gray eyes, a silver cloak, and a storm charm wrapped in pale metal and worn thread in her palm. She was the former seal guardian, and she understood relic law better than anyone else in the complex. She also carried guilt because she had once believed the frame could be contained by rules alone. Together they followed the dust trail into the next chamber, and the sound of distant horses above them reminded everyone that Lord Vance was not waiting patiently. The chamber opened wide without warning, and the group stopped at once. The room was round, lower than the halls before it, and built from dark stone blocks that had been fitted so tightly they looked like one single carved wall. In the center sat a buried metal door, flat and half hidden under dust, rust, old prayer chains, and worn dragon engravings around its edge. The black dust trail ran straight to it, then sank into the seam where the door met the floor. Kael crouched beside it, and when his gloved fingers touched the cold metal, his silver relic band burned softly against his wrist. That touch sent a sharp vision through him. For one breath, the room disappeared. He saw the first guardian woman again, a mysterious woman with dark hair hidden by shadow, wearing ancient relic guardian robes and standing before the cursed armor frame long ago. Her face was calm, but her eyes were full of warning. In the vision, she raised a hand toward the frame and spoke without sound, and Kael understood the feeling behind her words. The armor frame had not been made only for war. It had been made to hold something back. The dragon bone tuning core in its chest had once locked the curse in place, but the seals were part of a second lock, a deeper lock, built after someone tried to force the frame open. Kael pulled back with a gasp, and Lady Alina saw the change in his face at once. She asked him what he had seen, and he told her the truth in a low voice. The frame had not framed him by accident. Someone had used him as a living key because only his bloodline could wake the buried system of seals. That was the twist hidden under the ruin. Kael was not just blamed for the disaster. He had been chosen by the people who feared the abyss, and later by the people who wanted to control it. Lady Alina went still after hearing that, and the weight of her silence mattered more than any shout. She had spent years enforcing relic law, believing that strict order could keep the world safe. Now she saw that the laws had been built around a lie that was bigger than any one family. Her storm charm began to glow in her hand as she spoke the old binding words, and the soft light touched the buried door. Ben moved in beside her and checked the edge of the metal with careful hands, searching for weak points, hidden clamps, or any damage that could help them open it without breaking the seals inside. Mia climbed a cracked stone ledge and watched the chamber entrance because she knew they did not have much time. Above them, armor had begun to ring faintly through the floor. The Black Riders were inside the lower complex now, and their dark horses were moving through the upper halls with hard, steady force. Lord Vance was among them, elegant and cold in his long red coat with black armor trim, his silver hair bright under torchlight, his cold amber eyes full of hunger. He wanted the abyss power not because he needed it to survive, but because he wanted to rule without limits. He believed relic law had made the world weak, and he believed the hidden force below could let him crush every rival and rewrite every oath. That motive made him more dangerous because he was not acting from confusion. He knew exactly what he wanted, and he was willing to break every seal to get it. Ben found the first lock hidden in the stone edge, and with a careful twist of his wrench he made the buried door shudder. Kael pressed the first seal against the center engraving, and the pale metal ring lit with faint blue light. The door answered with a low hum. Then he placed the second seal, the silver relic disc wrapped in old prayer chains, and storm glow spread in thin lines across the floor. Lady Alina stepped forward with the third seal hovering before her palm, and the floating shard burned white and gold as if it recognized the room. The chamber began to wake. Dust fell from the ceiling. The prayer chains along the buried door lifted slowly, then tightened as if pulled by unseen hands. Kael felt the cursed armor frame far above them, and through the stone he sensed its giant shield arms shifting in a restless echo. He understood then that the frame was listening. It had always been listening. The black dust was not only corruption, it was a signal, a stain left behind by someone who had been trying to guide the frame toward this exact place. Before Kael could speak, a heavy crash rolled through the corridor outside, followed by the sharp voices of the Black Riders. Lord Vance had arrived at the chamber level. Mia drew back to the doorway with her scout knife ready. Ben planted himself beside the seal stand, and Lady Alina lifted her chin as if she were facing a court instead of an army. Kael stood at the door with all three seals in place, and the cold around him suddenly deepened. The buried metal door did not open yet, but it unlocked one hidden layer, and a dark voice seemed to rise from within the stone itself. It spoke his name without sound, as if it had been waiting for Kael Mercer longer than any of them could imagine. Kael did not run. He took one breath, steady and thin, and stepped closer to the opening as the chamber answered back. Above the hidden door, somewhere in the walls beyond, Lord Vance began to laugh because he could feel the relic power shifting. The clash was coming. The truth was not finished, and whatever waited behind that door was now awake enough to know Kael had found it. The hollow fields lay under a gray sky, and the dead grass bent in the wind like tired hands. Broken fence posts stood in long lines across the plain, and pale marker stones rose from the earth like old teeth. Everything looked silent, but the silence was wrong because the ground itself seemed to listen. Beneath that ruined land waited old metal, old prayer, and an ancient seal that had been buried for a reason. Kael Mercer stood at the buried door with tired blue eyes wide and his black hair damp with sweat, while his worn dark pilot coat hung open and his silver relic band glowed faintly on his wrist. He had come this far because the cursed armor frame had chosen him, and because if he failed now, Lord Vance would claim the seals and use them to open the abyss. That was the danger, and everyone with Kael understood it. If Vance found the second seal first, the fallen crown would become a key, the cursed frame would become a gate, and the world above could be dragged into ruin. Lady Alina stood close behind him, tall and still in her silver cloak, with white hair pulled back and sharp gray eyes fixed on the opening. She was the keeper of relic law, and she had spent her life guarding the kind of power that could save a city or break it. Ben Carter waited at her side, a broad man with brown hair, a soot-stained mechanic vest, and heavy work boots planted deep in the dirt. He was the armor repair specialist, the man who could hear the difference between a safe machine and a broken one. Mia Reed crouched near the edge of the door, her short red hair tucked under her hood, her bright eyes scanning the field for riders. She was the scout, quick and brave, and she had already found the hidden route that brought them here before Vance could trap them. Then the chamber breathed. The sound was low, deep, and old, and it rolled through the stone like a warning from memory itself. Kael leaned closer, and the darkness inside the opening answered him by speaking his name without words. He felt it in his bones, in his silver band, and in the strange pull behind his chest. Lady Alina noticed his face tighten, and she knew the truth had reached him in a way that could not be ignored. "Do not trust the first thing it offers," she said softly, and the small storm charm in her hand gave off a pale glow as she spoke the binding words. "Relics that wait too long often learn how to lie." Kael nodded, but his fear did not leave him. It simply changed shape. The chamber wanted him close, and the cursed armor frame far behind them seemed to answer from under the hills as if some hidden wire had been stretched between both places. Then the first black rider appeared on the far ridge, and another after that, until the horizon began to fill with red coats and dark horses. Lord Vance had sent them forward, and the long line of riders moved with hard purpose, as if the whole field belonged to him already. Vance himself did not ride at the front, he was too careful for that. He watched from farther back, through the eyes of his loyal men, with silver hair, cold amber eyes, and a cruel patience that made his smile worse than a shout. He wanted the relic power because he believed strength should belong to the person willing to take it. He had watched relic law keep old dangers sealed away, and he had decided that rules were only excuses for the weak. That was why he hunted the seals. That was why he wanted the fallen crown. And that was why he was laughing now, because he could feel the hidden chamber wake up. Ben moved first, opening his tool belt and pulling out a set of small clamp braces, wire hooks, and a folded tuning plate. "If this door is tied into the frame, then forcing it may send a shock back through the whole line," he said in a steady voice. "I can try to steady the pulse, but I need time." Mia sprang to her feet and drew her short blade, though she used it more like a pointer than a weapon. "Time is exactly what we do not have," she said, and she glanced toward the ridgeline as the riders spread out in a wide half-circle. "They are trying to box us in." Lady Alina turned her head, and her white hair caught the cold light. She looked calm, but she was already calculating every move. "Ben, work on the door. Mia, hold the left flank and watch the fence stones. Kael, you stay with me until the chamber tells us what it wants." Kael did not like being told to wait, yet he could feel how right she was. The hidden opening was not a simple hole in the ground. It was a lock, and something inside it was testing his presence the way a guard tests a key. He stepped forward with Alina, and as he did, the metal rim around the opening glimmered with old dragon marks. Then the darkness shifted, and a vision rushed into him like a sharp, cold wind. He saw a woman with dark hair hidden in shadow, wearing ancient relic guardian robes, standing before a much younger version of the chamber. She was the first guardian woman, and she looked directly at him with sad, steady eyes. She did not speak with a mouth or sound, but the truth came clear anyway. The chamber was not a tomb. It was a memory vault. It held the story of the seals, the armor frame, and the first betrayal that had broken the line of guardians long ago. Kael saw enough to understand the shape of the lie. The cursed frame had never been meant for Vance, and it had never been meant to destroy the world. It had been built to guard the seals by carrying their weight, but someone had twisted that purpose and bound it with a dragon bone tuning core so it would answer only to blood, grief, and ambition. Kael was not just a chosen heir by chance. He was the last living line of the guardian blood that had once kept the frame steady. That was why the chamber knew his name. That was why it had waited. He staggered back, and Alina caught his shoulder before he could fall. Her storm charm flashed brighter, and for one brief moment her calm face cracked with sorrow because she had known part of this already. "You see it now," she said. "The frame was not born cursed. It was made into a weapon after the first guardians were betrayed." That was the twist, clear and hard, and it changed the meaning of everything around them. Kael had believed the armor frame was only a monster waiting to be used. Now he understood that it had once been a shield, and that someone had turned its purpose inside out. Before he could ask more, the first rider charge hit the outer stones, and the field erupted into motion. Mia darted across the broken markers, pulling the riders off balance with quick feints and sudden turns. She was not strong enough to stop them all, but she was fast enough to turn their attack into confusion. Ben slammed the clamp braces into the buried door frame, and the silver lines of his tuning plate began to pulse in time with the relic marks. He gritted his teeth and muttered, come on," while the metal groaned under his hands. Lady Alina lifted her storm charm and spoke the binding words with a voice that cut through the wind. Pale light spread around her boots, and the ground at the door stopped shaking for a moment. Kael felt the chamber answer her words, but he also felt something deeper, something that did not fully trust her. That made sense because she was a guardian of law, and the chamber had been betrayed before by guardians who claimed to protect it. Then the open ridge flashed red, and Lord Vance finally stepped into view. He wore his long red coat like a banner of warning, and the crown-shaped ring on his hand glinted as he raised it toward the field. His expression was elegant and cold, almost bored, as if every person in front of him was only a piece on a board. "Bring me the boy," he called, and his voice carried cleanly across the ruined plain. "The seals are wasted on people who still fear what they can control." Kael heard that and felt anger rise through his fear. Vance wanted the abyss because he believed fear was weakness and mercy was a trap. He wanted the seals not only to open the gate, but to use the power behind it as proof that he was above every law Alina had ever defended. The Black Riders moved again, and this time they came in harder, trying to break through Mia and reach the chamber before Ben could stabilize the door. Mia ducked under a swinging blade, shoved one rider into a broken post, and snapped, "I hate people who bring horses to a relic fight." Even in danger, she kept her nerve, and that steadiness helped everyone else breathe. Ben managed to lock one side of the buried door, but the other side still trembled, and the chamber below began to hum in reply. Kael felt the pull growing stronger, not as a command now, but as a choice. The first guardian woman in the vision had shown him enough to understand the next step. The chamber wanted him to enter, but not as a victim. It wanted the heir to take his place and decide whether the frame would remain a weapon or become a shield again. Kael looked at Alina, and for the first time he saw that she was not simply protecting him. She was trusting him to become more than the frightened young man he had been at the start. "What do I do?" he asked. Alina answered without hesitation. "You go down there, you learn what the second seal remembers, and you come back with the truth before Vance reaches it first." Kael took one long breath, then another, and stepped toward the opening while the field shook around him. Above the hill, Lord Vance lifted his ring and smiled as if the night itself belonged to him. Below the earth, the chamber opened wider, and the old darkness waited with perfect stillness, ready to show Kael the next secret, whether he was ready or not. The hollow fields lay under a gray sky, and the dead grass bent low in the cold wind. Broken stone fences cut the plain into old lines, and pale marker posts stood like tired watchers across the ruin. Far above that quiet land, the hill with the broken throne sat under storm clouds, and the whole place felt trapped between fear and memory. Kael Mercer stood at the opening in the earth with dirt on his boots, black hair falling into his tired blue eyes, and the silver relic band tight around his wrist. He was a young man with a slim build, a serious face, and a heart that wanted truth even when truth looked dangerous. Lady Alina stood behind him in her silver cloak, her white hair sharp against the dark sky, her gray eyes calm and hard. She was the keeper of relic law, a former seal guardian, and the one person who understood that if the second seal fell into the wrong hands, the cursed armor frame would wake fully, and the abyss power inside it could spread again. Lord Vance waited on the hill above, a lean man with silver hair, cold amber eyes, and a long red coat that moved like a wound in the wind. He wanted the seals because he believed power belonged to the strongest hand, and because the fallen world around him had taught him to trust only control. Ben Carter, broad-shouldered and steady, watched from near the broken fence with soot on his mechanic vest and his tool belt hanging ready. Mia Reed stood beside him, red hair cut short and tucked under her hood, her bright eyes always moving, always searching, because she knew the land and the ruined roads better than anyone. Between them all lay the hidden metal door beneath the soil, and beneath that door waited the second seal, the chamber, and the answer Kael had come to find. Kael lowered himself through the opening as the ground gave a low shiver. The air below was cold and dry, and the sound of the storm faded into a deep hush. Old stone walls closed around him, lined with worn dragon marks, rust stains, and prayer chains that had long ago gone dark with age. He landed hard, caught himself, and looked up just as Lady Alina leaned over the edge and spoke in a clear, steady voice. She told him that the second seal did not guard with force alone. It remembered. It held the voices, choices, and fears of the people who made it. If Kael could awaken that memory, he might learn why the cursed armor frame chose him, and why the dragon bone tuning core inside its chest reacted to his relic band. That was the real danger, because Vance was not only hunting a weapon. He wanted the path to the abyss gateway hidden inside the seals, and he believed the fallen crown could join them into one key. If he reached the memory first, he could twist it, claim it, and use the old prison as a door. Kael took a breath and moved deeper, while above him the Black Riders began to circle the hill in the dark. Their armored horses stamped the ground, and their long red coats flashed in the wind as they cut off escape routes. Ben hurried to reinforce the top of the opening with iron braces, while Mia disappeared toward the lower road to watch for the riders and warn the others if Vance tried a direct attack. Lady Alina touched a small storm charm at her throat, and the pale metal glowed softly as she whispered binding words meant to steady the seal and protect Kael from the worst of the chamber vision. Then the hidden door behind him opened with a long, scraping sound, and the old chamber let him in. Inside, the second seal sat in a round stone room like a quiet moon caught beneath the earth. It was a silver relic disc, cracked at the edge, wrapped in old prayer chains, and alive with a faint storm glow. The room around it was empty except for broken altar stone and a ring of shattered pillars, but the air felt crowded with a memory too large for the place. Kael stepped closer, and the silver disc answered by lifting slightly in the air, as if it had been waiting only for him. Then the chamber changed. The walls blurred, the floor dimmed, and Kael saw the room as it had been long ago, full of clean light and solemn voices. In the vision stood a woman with dark hair hidden under shadow and ancient relic guardian robes. She was the first guardian woman, and although her face was calm, her eyes held sorrow and duty. She told the younger guardians that the cursed armor frame was never built as a simple war machine. It was a prison made from holy steel, dragon marks, and a dragon bone core designed to hold back abyss power after the seals failed in an older war. The first seal stabilized the frame. The second seal remembered the truth. The third seal watched the storm, and the fallen crown made by a traitor was built to merge the seals into a gateway key. The revelation struck Kael like a cold blade of understanding, because it meant the armor was not only cursed by accident. It had been designed to carry a burden too heavy for ordinary people, and his bloodline was tied to the guardians who first accepted that burden. The woman in the vision then turned toward him, even though she could not truly see him, and said that the one who carried the relic band would inherit the choice that ended the prison or preserved it. Kael felt fear, but he also felt a new kind of anger, because Vance had no right to turn a sacred lock into a weapon. The memory broke apart just as the chamber began to shake. Far above, Vance had moved his ring hand over the ground, and the black riders were pressing harder around the hill. Their horses circled like dark arrows, and one rider managed to break close enough to strike at Ben and the braces with a hooked blade. Ben met him with a steel wrench and a brutal swing that sent the rider stumbling back from the opening. Mia came racing in from the road, her cloak snapping behind her, and she loosed a stone from her sling that struck another rider squarely on the helm and drove him off balance. She was quick, brave, and sharp-eyed, and every move she made gave the others a little more time. Lady Alina lifted the storm charm and spoke the binding words again, stronger now, and the pale metal flashed like a star under cloud cover. Her voice held the calm of someone who had stood at a seal before, and the chamber answered her with a deep hum. Kael, still inside the vision and half inside the real room, saw one last image open before him. The first guardian woman placed the second seal into the earth and warned that if the seals were ever forced to remember in the wrong order, the prison would not open cleanly. It would fracture, and whatever waited beyond the abyss gateway would search for the strongest heart nearby. Then the vision showed a young version of Lord Vance standing in the back of the old hall with hungry eyes, listening in secret. He had known about the seals longer than he had ever admitted. He had not discovered the truth by chance. He had been studying relic law for years, waiting for a weak moment, because he believed the guardians hid power from the world and denied him his rightful place. That was why he wanted the hidden metal door, the second seal, and the fallen crown. He was not simply greedy. He wanted to force the old prison to obey him, and he believed that once he controlled the abyss power, no one could ever make him feel small again. Kael saw the full shape of that hunger, and the sight made his stomach tighten, because it showed him that Vance would not stop at one seal, one hill, or one night. Then the chamber floor split with a sharp crack, and the second seal rose higher, glowing storm white in Kael's hands. He grabbed it before it could fall, and the instant his fingers closed around the silver disc, he felt the memory settle into him like a living voice. He understood the last part at once. The seals were not just locks. They were warnings. Each one held a piece of the prison truth, and only when joined with care could they keep the cursed armor frame from becoming a gateway. Kael looked up through the broken chamber ceiling and felt the power of the first seal at his wrist answer the second seal in his hands. For a brief moment, the two relics sang together, and the hidden metal door above them groaned as if it had heard its own name. Vance must have felt that pulse too, because his laughter rolled down through the earth, low and pleased, and the black riders suddenly pulled back as if they had received a new command. Lady Alina went still at the top of the opening, her gray eyes widening, because she understood the same terrible truth Kael had just learned. Vance had not only found the field. He had found the memory trail, and now he knew that Kael was inside the chamber with the second seal. Kael clutched the relic disc, breathing hard while the storm charm flickered above him and the old stone around him shook in warning. He had come for one secret, but he had found a larger one, and the path ahead was darker than before. Yet even with fear pressing on him, he did not turn away. He lifted his head toward the waiting dark and stepped deeper into the next passage, because the third seal was now calling somewhere beyond the chamber, and Vance was coming fast. The passage beyond the second seal was narrow, cold, and older than the stone above it. Water dripped somewhere in the dark, and each drop sounded too loud in the tight tunnel. Kael Mercer moved forward with the relic disc pressed hard in one gloved hand, while the silver band on his wrist gave off a weak, steady glow. He was a young man with black hair, tired blue eyes, a slim frame, and a serious face that tried very hard not to show fear. Yet fear was there all the same, because the hollow fields had already taken him deeper than he had planned, and the curse linked to the armor frame was now pressing against his thoughts like a hand on a wound. He had come for one secret, but he had found a larger one, and now the third seal was calling to him from somewhere ahead, low and bright, like a voice heard through stone. Behind him, the chamber of the second seal still shuddered in dull waves, as if the old earth itself did not want him to leave. The storm charm above his shoulder flickered in a pale ring of light, and that small charm belonged to Lady Alina, the stern woman with white hair, sharp gray eyes, a silver cloak, and a voice that could turn soft relic power into binding law. She had once guarded one of the old seals, and she had sent Kael here because she believed he still had a chance to keep the world from breaking open. The charm was not only a guide because it reacted to her words, to her old oath, and to the rules that held the seals apart. If the seals were forced together the wrong way, the lock would not hold, and the abyss would have a path back into the world. That was the danger, and that was why Kael could not stop now, even if every step felt heavier than the last. Then the tunnel widened into a broken stairwell that dropped toward a buried hall. Kael reached the edge and looked down. Far below, hidden stone caught a strange white glow, and broken altar pieces stood in a circle around something that hovered in the air. The third seal was there, a storm-lit relic shard shining with white and gold light, wrapped in dragon sigils that pulsed like a living heartbeat. It floated above a ring of shattered altar stone, and the light around it made the dust look like falling ash. Kael felt the pull of it at once, not with his eyes, but with the curse inside the ancient armor frame far behind him. The frame was a cathedral-sized black and gold warshell with horned shoulders, cracked holy plates, glowing rune seams, a praying knight helm, giant shield arms, and a dragon bone tuning core in its chest. It was not moving now, but it remembered this place, and that memory was waking inside Kael like a buried storm. He started down the stairs, slow at first, then faster when he heard metal strike stone behind him. Vance had found the upper chamber. Lord Vance was a lean man with silver hair, cold amber eyes, a long red coat trimmed in black armor, ornate gloves, and a crown-shaped ring that flashed on his hand. He carried himself like a man who never doubted his own right to rule. He wanted the abyss power because he believed fear was the only true law, and because the old relics were not tools in his mind, but keys to a throne that no one else should touch. He had sent the Black Riders across the hollow fields to drive Kael toward the seals and break him open from every side. The riders were armored men on dark horses, their helmets shadowed, their coats red against the gray land, and their gear covered in storm dust from the long chase. They followed Vance because he promised them power, rank, and safety in a world he meant to control. Their boots now rang from the stair above, and their coming made the whole buried hall feel smaller. Kael reached the lower chamber just as the first rider appeared at the top of the stairs. He did not wait. He stepped behind a broken altar stone, drew a slow breath, and felt the silver relic band tighten with heat. The third seal answered him with a flash, and the air around the shard bent as if the room itself had become a drum skin stretched too tight. Kael did not understand the full rule yet, but he knew this much: the seals were alive to one another. The first seal, the pale metal ring with dragon marks, had once steadied the cursed armor frame and weakened the abyss influence. The second seal, the cracked silver disc with prayer chains, had been hidden beneath the hollow fields because the old guardians feared anyone greedy enough to use it alone. The third seal was different because it did not rest in a box or under stone. It waited in a hovering ring of broken altar pieces, as if it had been prepared to choose a bearer. Kael took one step closer, and the light struck his tired blue eyes so sharply that he had to squint. From the far side of the hall, a new sound rose through the hum of the seal, and Kael turned just in time to see a wall of stone split open, not by force but by old design. A hidden metal door, buried under rust and prayer chains, slid upward with a grinding sigh and revealed a side passage thick with dust. From that passage came Lady Alina. She moved with calm control, her white hair shining in the relic light, her face stern but troubled. Ben Carter followed close behind her, a broad man with brown hair, a soot-stained mechanic vest, rolled sleeves, a tool belt, fingerless gloves, and heavy boots that made him seem built from the same work as the halls around him. Ben was kind-faced and dependable, and he cared about keeping broken things from falling apart, whether they were machines, roads, or people. Mia Reed came behind him, quick and alert, with short red hair, a fitted scout jacket, dark travel pants, light armor pads, and a hooded cloak that let her blend into shadow. She had guided the group through ruined roads and dangerous ground, and she never missed a detail if her life depended on it, which it often did. Kael felt surprise first, then relief, then doubt. He had not expected them here, and he had no time to decide whether that was good or bad. Alina lifted one hand, and the storm charm above Kael trembled as if it heard her. "Do not touch the shard yet," she said, and her voice carried both warning and regret. "The third seal is tied to memory, and memory will test you before power does." Kael looked at her with anger mixed into his fear, because she had never told him how deeply this all ran. He wanted to ask why the seals were hidden, why the armor frame seemed to remember him, and why she had waited until now. Before he could speak, Ben stepped forward and pointed to the broken altar ring. "That shard is pulling the room apart," he said. "If Vance gets it while the others are still open, he can force the fallen crown to lock onto all three." Mia looked up the stairwell, where armored feet kept clanking closer. "And he is bringing enough riders to make that very ugly," she added, her bright eyes fixed and sharp. Then the revelation came, and it changed the air in the room. Alina told Kael that the cursed armor frame had not simply been found by accident. It had been built around him, or for someone like him, because the first Guardians had discovered a terrible truth. The dragon bone tuning core in the frame responded to a bloodline linked to the old seal makers, and Kael was not just a thief, or a runaway, or a boy dragged into a relic hunt by chance. He was the chosen heir of the old seal line, the only one who could carry the full strain of the frame without letting the abyss seep through it. Kael stared at her, stunned and silent, while the truth settled over him like cold rain. This was why the first seal had answered him. This was why the second seal had opened for him. This was why the third seal was calling. Vance wanted the seals because he wanted the fallen crown, a fractured black crown with red vein-like cracks and relic sockets along the rim, designed to merge the seals into a gateway key for the abyss. But Kael was the living piece needed to make the key work, and if Vance reached him at the wrong moment, the old prison would break. A heavy boom shook the stairs above, and the first rider came through with a drawn weapon, followed by two more. Vance was right behind them, his red coat glowing in the seal light like a wound in the dark. "You cannot hide relic truth from me forever," he said, his voice smooth and cold. "That shard belongs in my hand, and the boy belongs at my side or under my heel." The riders spread out, trying to cut Kael off from the third seal. Mia moved fast, slipping to one side and kicking loose a pile of broken stone that crashed into the stair base. Ben rushed to a cracked support and jammed a metal brace into place from his tool belt, forcing the stair passage to sag and slow the advance. Alina raised the storm charm and spoke binding words with firm control, and the charm brightened into a ring of pale blue light that pushed back the first wave of shadow pressure. Kael felt the relic disc warm in his hand, and then the second seal began to hum in answer, as if all three seals were waking at once. The room filled with light and pressure. The third seal lowered a little, no longer floating so high, and Kael understood that it wanted a choice, not a command. He stepped forward not because he was brave, but because he was finally learning what fear could not decide for him. He was afraid, yes, but fear no longer owned his feet. Vance saw that and smiled with thin certainty. "Good," he said. "Come closer and prove you are mine to claim." Kael looked at him, then at Alina, then at Ben and Mia, and he saw in their faces that this moment mattered to all of them. If he failed, the seals would be forced into Vance's hands. If he succeeded, the old path might hold for one more day. He reached out toward the third seal, and at that very second, the buried hall answered with a low crack from deep below, as if something even older had heard the call and stirred in its sleep. Kael froze, Alina narrowed her eyes, and Vance finally lost his calm. Whatever was awakening beneath the hollow fields was not part of any one plan, and the next step would decide whether the seals became a lock, a key, or a doorway into a darkness no one had yet seen. The hollow fields had gone silent in a way that felt wrong, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Dead grass bent under the gray sky, broken stone fences made long lines through the emptiness, and the pale marker posts stood like tired sentries around the buried metal door. Kael Mercer, a slim young man with black hair, tired blue eyes, and a worn dark pilot coat, stayed frozen with his leather-gloved hand still reaching forward. The silver relic band on his wrist gave off a thin cold glow, and his ash-marked boots sank a little into the cracked earth. Beside him, Lady Alina, a tall woman with white hair, sharp gray eyes, and a silver cloak over dark command dress, kept her posture straight even while the ground gave a low rumble beneath her. Lord Vance, a lean man with silver hair, cold amber eyes, and a long red coat trimmed with black armor, no longer hid his anger. His ornate gloves tightened, and the crown-shaped ring on his hand flashed in the storm light. He had come to claim the power below because he believed the abyss would make him untouchable, and now that the buried hall had answered, he feared losing control before the final seal could be used. That fear mattered because if the third seal opened the wrong way, the old chamber below could become a doorway instead of a lock, and the world above would not be ready for what waited underneath. Ben Carter rushed forward first because that was the kind of man he was. He had a broad, sturdy build, brown hair, a soot-stained mechanic vest, rolled-up sleeves, a tool belt, fingerless gloves, and heavy work boots that never seemed to slow him down for long. He was not a warrior by nature, but he cared about keeping dangerous things from breaking apart, and that made him vital now more than ever. Mia Reed moved with him, quick and sharp-eyed, her short red hair tucked under a hooded cloak, her fitted scout jacket pulled tight over light armor pads. She was the one who watched the edges, noticed traps, and trusted her instincts when others hesitated. Behind them, the cursed armor frame stood like a silent giant, cathedral-sized and black and gold, with horned shoulders, cracked holy-looking plates, glowing rune seams, and shield arms that looked made to hold back a storm. Its helm shaped like a praying knight stared into the field, while the dragon bone tuning core in its chest gave off a slow pulse. Kael had been chosen for that frame, and that fact had never felt heavier. He was its heir, but also its burden, and everyone there knew that if the frame woke fully, it would answer only to the one bound to it. Alina lifted her small storm charm, a pale metal relic tied to worn thread, and spoke binding words in a calm voice that carried over the field. The charm glowed softly when she used it, and that steady light helped keep the rising pressure from breaking the group apart. She knew the relic law, she had guarded seals before, and she understood the old rules better than anyone else alive. That made her important, but it also made her afraid, because the buried hall below the hollow fields had not stirred for generations, and something in its response told her the law itself might not be enough anymore. The crack under the earth widened into a deep groan, and dust rose in a low gray cloud around the hidden metal door. Kael stepped back at last, his face tight and pale, while Alina turned her head toward him with a hard look that said the moment of truth had arrived. She did not yell at him, but her voice became sharp and clear. She said the third seal would not simply open on its own, and she warned him that the seals were never built for greed. They were built to test intent. If the wrong hand used them, the power beneath could answer in a twisted way. Vance heard that warning and smiled without warmth because he had waited too long to hear anyone admit fear. He said the seals were a waste if they stayed buried. He said the world needed a stronger ruler, and he said the abyss would obey whoever was brave enough to claim it. Alina answered that the abyss did not obey, it tempted, it spread, it broke the mind of anyone who tried to own it. That was the true reason she had guarded the first and second seal for so long. She had not only been protecting relic law, she had been protecting the world from the hunger of people like Vance. Then the ground split with a brighter flash, and the old buried chamber below threw up a wave of cold wind that made everyone brace. From that opening came a strange voice, soft at first, then clear enough for all of them to hear. It was a woman with dark hair hidden in shadow, wearing ancient relic guardian robes, and she appeared only in the vision inside the cursed frame memory. Kael saw her face in his mind at the same time the frame shuddered. She was the first guardian woman, the one who had shaped the old order before any of them were born. Her voice carried a terrible calm, and she said the seals had not been made to keep a monster out. They had been made to keep a crown from becoming a key. That revelation struck Kael harder than any blow. It meant the fallen crown, the fractured black crown with red vein-like cracks and relic sockets along the rim, was not just a broken enemy tool. It was the missing piece that could force the seals to join together and open the abyss. Vance had not been chasing power in a vague way. He had been collecting the crown pieces because he wanted to turn the ancient protection itself into a weapon. The twist changed everything, and every face on the field showed it. Mia took a fast step back and looked from Alina to Kael, her bright eyes wide with alarm as the pieces started to fit together in her mind. Ben clenched his jaw and muttered that Vance had been setting a trap from the start. Alina, who had kept her voice calm through danger, now looked almost wounded by the truth because she realized how close the old laws had come to being turned inside out. Vance, seeing their shock, finally showed his real face. He had never wanted to merely unlock power. He wanted to force the world to kneel by using the abyss as proof that only he could control the deepest fear. He believed that once he held the power under the hollow fields, every seal, every guardian rule, and every rebel would have to bow. That was why he had sent black riders into the area days ago, armored men on dark horses with long red coats, black armor trim, shadowed helmets, and storm dust on their gear. They had been sweeping the roads, blocking help, and forcing the path open bit by bit. Now those riders appeared again at the far edge of the field, rising over the broken fence line like a moving wall of iron and hoarse breath. Their leader carried a heavy relic lantern, and when he raised it, the field below the broken throne hill answered with a dim, cursed pulse. Vance had not only come to the hollow fields. He had already prepared the next stage of his plan at the broken throne, the ancient empty seat of dark stone and cracked metal that sat on the ruined hill beyond the field. He wanted to use the throne as a focus point, the crown as a key, and the third seal as the final turn. Kael realized then that the old path might hold for one more day only because Vance had wanted them to believe they still had time. That false hope had bought him room to move. The buried hall below suddenly shifted again, and the hidden metal door jolted upward just enough to show a narrow seam of blackness beneath it. A cold hiss came out, and the prayer chains around the door rattled like frightened teeth. Alina planted her boots and raised the storm charm higher, speaking binding words that made the pale metal shine. Ben rushed to the side of the door and began checking the rusted frame, looking for a weak point that could be held shut. Mia climbed a broken fence post and scanned the field because the black riders were spreading out in a half circle, ready to cut off any retreat. Kael looked at the cursed armor frame, and for the first time he understood what it had been trying to show him through the earlier visions. It was not calling him to dominate the relics. It was asking him to decide whether power should be owned at all. The frame itself had been built during a time of fear, and the first guardian woman had trusted someone once before. That trust had led to the seals, the crown, and the cursed sleep below the fields. Kael felt that truth settle into him like a weight. He was afraid, and he still was not ready, but he was also tired of letting fear choose for him. He stepped toward the door, then stopped when Alina held out the third seal, the storm-lit relic shard floating inside a ring of broken altar stone, its white and gold glow reflected in her eyes. She told him that if he touched it now, he had to do so with a clear heart, because the seal would respond to the one who accepted responsibility instead of control. Kael nodded once, slow and serious, and placed his hand near the third seal without grabbing it yet. The light changed at once. Deep below, something massive shifted in reply, and the whole hollow field shook as if the buried hall had just noticed him. Vance saw the change and shouted for his riders to move. The black riders began their charge across the dead grass, their horses pounding over cracked earth as the storm grew darker overhead. Alina braced herself. Ben grabbed a metal brace from the door frame. Mia shouted a warning from the fence line. And Kael, with the cursed armor frame looming behind him like a silent judge, felt the third seal warming in the air between his hand and the darkness below. He knew then that the next moment would decide whether the buried hall became a shield, a weapon, or a gate into something no one had yet faced. The field tightened around him, the riders closed in, and the ancient chamber below answered again with one more low crack from the dark. Kael did not move yet because that hesitation was no longer weakness. It was the moment before choice, the breath before a true step into his own fate. Alina saw that change in him, and her stern face softened just enough to show trust. She had spent years guarding relic law, and now she understood that law alone would not save the world. It needed a person willing to carry the burden it placed on him. Ben shouted that the door frame was holding for now, but only barely. Mia warned that the black riders were circling toward the north side, where the old stone fence had already fallen. Vance raised one hand and called out that Kael could still stand with him and claim a stronger future, but the offer sounded thin even to his own ears. He wanted the power beneath the hollow fields because he feared being powerless, and that fear had driven every cruel choice he made. Kael heard that fear clearly now, and for the first time he did not answer it with fear of his own. He answered with steady silence. The third seal hovered brighter, the hidden door trembled wider, and the old hall below sent out a pulse that felt almost like a heartbeat. Whatever waited under the hollow fields was awake now, and the next part of the journey would begin with the seal, the crown, and the truth still buried in the dark. The hollow fields lay under a heavy gray sky, and the wind moved through dead grass like a low warning. Kael Mercer stood at the buried metal door with tired blue eyes, black hair, and a worn dark pilot coat, while Lady Alina watched beside him in her silver cloak, calm and severe. Ben Carter, a broad man with brown hair and a soot-stained vest, kept his tools ready, and Mia Reed, a red-haired scout with quick eyes, guarded the open ground. They all knew the same truth now. If the third seal woke fully in the wrong hands, the fallen crown could become a key to the abyss. Lord Vance arrived on the rise with his black riders, his silver hair bright under the storm light and his cold amber eyes fixed on Kael. He wanted the seals because the abyss had been whispering to him for years, feeding his fear that power would always belong to someone stronger. That fear had made him cruel, and now it made him desperate. He shouted that the old relic law was a lie, that only one ruler should command the buried power, and that Kael would open the path for him. Then he threw his hand forward, and the riders surged toward the hill. Ben slammed the hidden door locks into place, while Mia led the first charge away from the center with sharp movement and steady courage. Lady Alina lifted her storm charm, and pale light traced her words as she called the third seal higher. The seal answered with white and gold fire, and the ground below trembled so hard that dust fell from the broken stone fence. Kael stepped toward the buried hall, and the cursed armor frame answered him from below, deep and slow, like a giant waking from a long dream. Inside the opening, a vision rose from the old memories stored in the frame. A first guardian woman with dark hair and ancient robes stood beside the armor long ago, and she revealed the truth that changed everything. The armor was not built to serve the abyss. It was built to lock it away, and the fallen crown had been made by the same hands as a prison key. Kael understood at last why his bloodline mattered. He was not chosen to rule the curse. He was chosen to end the chain. With that truth, Kael placed his silver relic band against the third seal, and Alina joined her light to his. The seal split free from the stone ring and locked into the crown, not as a weapon, but as a final binding. Lord Vance tried to reach them, but the black riders were driven back by the surge of light, and his hand shook as the abyss denied him. The hidden door sealed shut behind the last pulse, the cursed armor frame grew still, and the hall below fell silent. Kael looked up at the gray sky, no longer afraid of what he carried, because he had finally chosen to protect the world instead of fear it.